Part 2 of Nicole Van Tassel's experiences as a polygamous wife. Next on Polygamy. What love is this? This is part 2 of our interview with Nicole Van Tassel, who was a plural wife and a member of the AUB polygamy group, which is also known as the Allred polygamy group. She left an abusive polygamous marriage in July of 2016. And we talked a lot about her story in our last show. This time we're going to tell more about her story as she was raised not in polygamy, but in the LDS Church. So going from the LDS Church kind of a doctrinal background, she was not prepared for the polygamy group type of background. After so much abuse in her marriage, she finally left and has been in court battles ever since. In fact, she's been abused and victimized by her husband and re-victimized by the court systems of the state of Utah and Utah County. So I would like to introduce and welcome back our special guest, Nicole Van Tassel, Henderson.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and sharing your story.
And thank you for this opportunity to put a voice to some of this.
And you know, I appreciate it so much because so many women from polygamy do not want to tell their stories. They're afraid. They still have the fear of repercussion and retaliation. And sometimes it's just shameful.
As do I, but I really believe that
it needs to be told.
It has to be told. And people, even people in Utah don't realize how many polygamous groups and sects and cults there are that, and they're destroying families.
They destroy
and generations,
human lives and families.
And generations and generations and generations. And one of my sole purposes, I feel like this is kind of a calling, is that I have 7 minors that I do not want to have to see
go through this.
Their mother cry every night when their father goes and sleeps with another woman.
Yeah, yeah. And they don't need to have that model either of a man.
They don't.
Of the man sleeping with another wife. And
the other man's wife's children in their home.
Right,
and
the competition
of the kids, because it always goes from the one wife taking her frustrations out on the other wife's children, no matter how perfect it's supposed to be.
You cannot get by with that. So let's talk about the abuse now that took place. Now I'm going to lay a foundation for that first. Were you ever threatened with blood atonement?
Yes.
Were you ever afraid it was imminent?
Yes.
Now, for our viewers who are not familiar with blood atonement, the early Mormon doctrine taught by the way, Joseph Smith started it. Brigham Young was the one who made it more, normal. Was they believed that a person could commit a sin that would not be covered by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and so that sinner had to be murdered to pay for their own sin.
And they had to do it themselves.
And they had to ask somebody to do it and kill them. You didn't kill yourself, they killed you.
Well, in my situation, in front of my children, my husband said, because I had texted another man, that I would have to slit my own throat and debowel myself.
Which is the temple ceremony that they
and he was saying this in front of my children.
Oh, now that's abuse right there too.
Yes. To be forgiven for texting another man.
Which is not one of the unforgivable sins. So, that's the kind of a husband you had in the polygamy group. Explain your experience, not only through the experience, but as an observer, what the male attitude is towards females in polygamy groups.
My dad said it probably the best in the Salt Lake Tribune article that was written. We're chattel. We are basically property you can breed, sell, pen up, and it is basically we're chattel, we're property. We're not humans. Feelings don't matter. Covenants and ordinances do. And that's how you're treated.
And that's exactly the way they believe. They can trade you back and forth. They can promise you as a plural wife to another man if he will give you something else. And it's sex trafficking.
It is
Even the FBI has it listed under their sex trafficking
And the
groups.
state of Utah needs to stop being a, quote, family-friendly state and start being able to say the word polygamy when domestic violence and this stuff comes into a courtroom. And
I
quit
agree.
being afraid of it.
Well, I don't think they're afraid of it. I don't think that's the problem. It's more to do with, well.
Yes. Maybe another episode.
Maybe. So you had 15 children.
In 19 years.
How many of your children are still in the group?
My 6 oldest have all married people that's families are involved in the group.
In the group. And what's their attitude towards you now that you're no longer part of the family or part of the group?
I'm not recognized as their mother. The concubine is. I've had them with my dad up on the state Senate floor pass notes to other senators saying that my father, who's one of the most honorable men I know.
And your father, by the way, is a state senator.
He was.
He was at the time.
Yeah, at the time.
Right.
That my father was dishonest and that their mother was a whore.
Okay.
And they're passing notes to the other state senators and sending out emails
about their
about
mother.
the abuse and the pictures that my dad did show in a private closed caucus meeting, and how they got leaked, we still don't know.
Well, that's politics too. So they're not family friendly in any way you look at it, unless you believe the way they believe and toe the line. They're not a family
Parent
friendly
alienation.
religion.
It's a parent alienation to the point where I've had 4 children get married, and I have one that's getting married in February, that I'm not even listed as their mother on the wedding invitations.
That's a heartbreak. That hurts.
And I have not met.
And you know what? That's just total brainwashing. That's
is.
what it is. The religion does the brainwashing and the mind control on the children. I've seen it over and over and over again, and I'm sure you have as well.
Well, I think that they're scared, and it took me, and luckily I had the background and the support of my family that when I decided to finally leave. And a lot of the polygamous women that try to leave don't have the support that I have.
Oh yeah. There's many who don't.
Because they will break you down
Many who
financially in every way they can to get you to come back, and then you're just re-victimized,
Right.
or you go missing.
Okay, let's talk about your abuse. Let's talk about your physical abuse that your husband perpetrated on you, and you can go back as far as you want, and just bring it up to what happened, where we got the pictures of the results.
Within the first 2 weeks that I was married, and I had left my family and basically felt like I had given everything up for this knight in shining armor, and he was getting up for work like at 4:30, and I put my arm around him and just said, "Stay for 5 more minutes," as a newlywed. And he threw me against the wall and said, "I can't wait till you have a baby to smother, so you won't have to smother me."
Wow. And you'd been married how long?
Maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
Another time was we had the 3 little boys that were 2 and under, and I had set up family pictures. I got down to the photography place, couldn't get a hold of him, called his cell phone. He said, "Well, I'm not going to come. I'm going to a movie with a brother-in-law." And, as a person that you think that wants to be in pictures with their family, I had these 3 beautiful sons that were, 2 and under. And just to get them ready, plus me, and then to show up and go by myself was devastating.
And this shows the male attitude toward their wives.
Yeah.
It's typical. It's not unusual.
So it just kept increasing, the mental abuse, the psychological abuse, the physical abuse, the having so many kids so fast in my physical condition, and having doctors tell him, she shouldn't have any more babies because it's life-threatening. But I did because I thought if I did, maybe he would love me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe I would be the one woman that would be enough for him.
Have you read the story of Leah and Jacob in
Genesis? Yeah. Doesn't work that way, does it?
Doesn't work that way.
Well, it just kept escalating. And after he married the concubine, having as many pregnancies as I had, I actually knew that she was pregnant before she knew she was pregnant. Mm. And when you find out, it's one thing to know that your husband's having sex with another woman, but when they're actually pregnant with another, having another child, it just really rips open all the wounds of that, and you have nowhere to go to turn to except other plural wives that just say, oh, it'll be okay. It's going to be okay.
You'll live through it. You'll get over it.
And it's not. It's not. It's a verification that your husband is having a, quote, legal affair with a mistress right in front of you.
It's okay. And in their minds, it's okay.
It's not.
It's not okay.
Because it devastates you, your security, how you feel about yourself, about looking in the mirror, about questioning, do I even matter anymore?
Well, and not only that, because this pain reflects upon the God who commanded it. It ruins so many people against God.
Well, and to have your children have to see you cry every other night that their dad's not there, mm-hmm. It devastates them. Because, boys want to protect their mothers, and mm-hmm. I have 9 sons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So there was now, first of all, he did abuse you in front of the children, both
yes.
verbally and physically.
And mentally and psychologically.
And he lied about what happened.
Which affidavit?
Okay, so let's go into this latest legal deal that's took place.
April 10th, 2016, our oldest daughter had just gotten engaged, and I, a few months before, a friend from junior high had got in touch with my sister on Facebook and just said, how's Nicole doing? And she said, you better sit down, she has 12 kids. But we went to the same high school, and Kyle was the excavator that added on to our high school. Mm-hmm. So I met him in Roosevelt. And so this friend of mine, and thank God for him, for helping me find enough courage to get out, mm-hmm. said, what are you doing living this lifestyle? You're so much better than that. And it was the first time in 20 years I actually had someone give me a little bit of self-worth instead of saying, you do this wrong, you do this wrong. And anyways, we had texted a couple times back and forth, and we just sent out a reply all, sending a picture of our daughter getting, Kylie, will you marry me? And when the text came back from this particular fellow, it said, congratulations, enjoy your day. And Kyle picked up my phone and said, who is this? And he thought it was his brother by the same name. And I said, no, it's, a friend from junior high. And I was in the kitchen cooking for between 50 and 75 people, somewhere around in there. And he dragged me back to the bedroom. And my 3-year-old daughter was asleep on the bed. He went into the bathroom and used my phone and called this fellow and said, what the F are you doing contacting my wife? And he said, if you do it again, I will effing kill you and her. And then he proceeded to take me onto the floor in front of my 3-year-old who was asleep and just strangle me and beat me. He broke my voice box. He took my hoodie. I had a hoodie on, and the ligature, and it crushed my voice box, where I've had several medical things that it will never be the same. Mm-hmm. And he just kept punching. And our daughter woke up and she was crying. And then he went and even opened the door and asked, there was 9 minors in the house. Do you want to see what a whore of a mother you have? And invited them to come in and look at me laying on the floor, completely helpless. In these pictures that you show, if you look at my hands, they're just bruised from trying to protect myself.
Okay, shall we show the
Absolutely.
pictures now? Okay, there's several pictures that were taken of your bruises after this happened, and this was for a physical documentation
Yes.
of the attack. So this is one.
That's, yeah. And that's where you can see my hands and the ligature on my neck.
Right, you can see that very
And
clearly.
the punch marks.
Uh-huh.
And
the chest.
And this is where he grabbed my arm and pulled me back. There's another one where you can see whole fingerprints where he dragged me back to the room.
Uh-huh.
That's the strangulation. And those are bruises on my arms and legs that he kicked and hit.
Okay.
That's so you can see on the one arm where it's a whole handprint behind.
Uh-huh.
And then on the front where he had also grabbed me.
And how many days after the attack were these pictures taken?
The next morning.
The next morning.
Because
It's a good thing you took them.
The fellow that I had texted knew my parents and called my parents and said, I'm worried. And my parents sent my sister that lived just a mile away. And so my sister is the one that actually said,
Right.
we've got to take a picture.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my parents drove out from Vernal and we took these pictures.
Now, I know that the pictures, the bruises that you've got there are worse if we were looking at them eye to eye
Yes.
than on camera, because it does kind of fade a little bit through the process of taking the picture. So you left him, and have you filed divorce? Did you file charges against him? Tell us what happened.
So I stayed because my oldest daughter was getting married and I wanted to be part of, that was in April, my daughter was getting married in June, and I wanted to stay to be part of my girl's wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it kept increasing, and he kept saying, well, if you're truly repentant, you're going to help retaliate against this man. You'll destroy his truck. He kept up and anning, and then he did kind of what Cody Brown did is, I want a legal divorce, and you sign over full custody to the concubine and everything else. And I kept saying, no, these are my children. I had them. I'm not. They're mine. And so it just, the aggravation and intimidation and the abuse just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then on July 10th, which is my son's birthday, he said, you have 1 hour to pack a bag.
And he kicked you out?
He said that he was going to take me where no one would find me.
Okay.
And with no water, no food, no money. And I had been working with holding out help and my parents. In the meantime, he kept stealing my phone and not letting me have access to a phone. Yeah. So I was slipping notes across the street to a neighbor. In fact, in my bra, I wrote phone numbers and slid it and put my driver's license and a prepaid Visa card that I got so I could escape if I had to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you finally got out, you finally got away from him and filed charges.
Yes.
What happened?
He was charged with 6 felonies.
6 felonies.
Including domestic violence in front of a child, and witness tampering. And just this last December, Utah County refused to prosecute the case because my oldest children were going to testify against me.
They were going to testify against you, claiming that they didn't believe that it really happened.
There's
So
4.
what did they do with the picture? The pictures are there showing.
So there was 4 stories that I beat myself up, and obviously.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I can really, put fingerprints on my own neck. And then it was the dog. I took a dog family pet that got run over to the vet, and the dog attacked me after it had been sedated on I-15, driving in rush hour traffic.
That's easy to refute by any forensic.
And then it was that I got ran over by a snowmobile in April, the next April. And then it was a cooler that fell on top of me. So we know that the dog was driving the snowmobile, I was beating myself up, and the dog crashed into a cooler, and that's how I got all those bruises.
Got all those bruises, okay, and the
yeah,
thing. Right. Okay.
Somewhere I got clotheslined along the way.
Now, all this lawsuit took place in Utah County. Now, I know I helped. We got to go through this quickly, but to set the foundation for this as well. I helped a lady from the AUB several years ago, and she filed for a divorce, and the judge said in the opening first court session, told both attorneys, we know the background of this couple, but that word will never be used in these proceedings. That's
the polygamy word.
He absolutely refused to let it be used. What in the world is wrong with that?
Especially when the concubine gets up and says, I'm the plural wife of Kyle Henderson. Mm-hmm.
Which is a felony.
A felony.
Which is in the Utah State Constitution to be prohibited forever.
Yep.
And yet they can just come right up in the court and
have it be mocked.
It. Mm-hmm.
And so he took a plea deal in December. All of those felonies and stuff, he pled no contest to 1 Class A, 1 Class B misdemeanor, and 1 year probation as long as he doesn't break any other laws and minor traffic violations. And I said,
so it's just literally,
Your Honor,
more or less,
he's a felon.
Yeah.
Because he is a polygamist.
Right. And Utah has said repeatedly they will prosecute crimes within polygamy even though they won't prosecute polygamy.
His own attorney, Mark Shurtleff,
Which I find very interesting.
The former state attorney general said, we will not prosecute polygamy as long as there's not being harm done to women, children.
Correct.
And I believe tax fraud was in there too. But I know for sure women or children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the abuses within polygamy and incest was included in that.
And so when my husband hired Mark Shurtleff should have recused himself from that case.
Well, he should have, but it just shows you, again, the favoritism that is being shown by the legal system in this state. And one thing that kind of gripes me is the fact that Cody Brown was going to be a character witness for your husband. And you know why that bothers me so much is a few years ago, the reality show had an episode where they had the Cody Brown and his wives plus some people from polygamy groups in Las Vegas.
Right.
She's a relative of mine, Colleen Snow, was there, and she was crying because of some of the abuse that she had been through, and they just kind of mocked her. Well, we don't do that. There's not abuse in polygamy, and we don't, and they actually condemned the abuse, and here Cody Brown is going to be a character witness for your abuser. That's what bothers me, the hypocrisy of all of it coming down.
In a twisted, weird story, Cody Brown was also his character witness when he got excommunicated from the Mormon Church.
It's just, it breaks your heart to see all of this go down in the state of Utah. I go to people outside of the state and tell these stories, and they go, only in Utah. What is going on there? And they just shake their head. They can't believe that Utah does this.
That's why I feel like it's so strong for me as a woman to stand up, to give a voice.
And you need
to all of these women, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be polygamy, and usually they're combined. Mm-hmm. But even in my case, take polygamy out of it. Mm-hmm. I was beat to the point where I couldn't get out of bed for a week.
We helped another one, Rachel Kingston. She's been on our show several times and told her story, and her husband was the same way.
Yes.
He would just beat her, and he had 4 wives, and he actually ended up losing all but one because of his physical abuse. Is anything ever done?
No.
No.
And that's why we have to get this outside of Utah.
That's why we call it re-victimization.
And it
because
is.
a woman will leave and because she's been victimized and abused and her human rights, basic human rights, taken away from her. And then she gets out and they'll set her up to fail. And then they'll twist it in court so that she loses her kids and doesn't have any money, doesn't have a place to live, hoping that she'll come back. And if she does, then she will be abused even worse for leaving in the first place.
He just picked the wrong cowgirl to mess with.
Okay, well, these boots are made for walking, huh? One of the, we've just got a couple of minutes left. One of the articles I read about your story was a quote from Marianne Watson, who is a well-known pro-polygamist from the AUB polygamy group. And she said that she couldn't believe this happened to you because he was a bishop. You know, like bishops don't do these kinds of things. But she said, we don't want abuse, but we don't want to be abused either. Like your lawsuit against him was abusive against him and against the AUB group.
And also, Marianne Watson said that about me personally, she kept to herself and was very quiet.
Yeah,
well, I was the only woman besides the Relief Society that held a leadership position. I was in the youth council.
But what's that got to do with anything anyway? Just
well,
you were
I mean, she was just kind of dishing me because, you know, I wasn't, obviously I didn't fit the mold of a polygamist.
So, sounds more like they don't want negative attention than they want to have justice done. And so to wind us down, you've had an opportunity to be on the Dr. Phil show and tell your story.
Yes, they've contacted me. Okay. And we're still making the arrangements.
Still making the arrangements, okay. And I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to, and I hope it comes to pass, hope it happens so that it could go more national.
I hope so too.
And your story can get out and you won't be the victim anymore.
I refuse to be a victim. Yeah. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and I'm a survivor of polygamy. Mm-hmm. And I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a survivor.
Thank you, Nicole, for telling your story.
And thank you.
I really, really thank you. You know, we've always stated that the primary reason for doing our program is to bring biblical truths to polygamists, and we've done that. We've applied both the Old Testament and New Testament principles and teachings to today's polygamy groups and their claims. 1 Corinthians 7:2 is certainly a profound verse about monogamy. The New Testament also has a very clear teaching we've mentioned, how God commanded husbands to treat their wives. Ephesians chapter 5 teaches that a true Christian man will treat his wife better than he treats himself, that he will care for her and provide for her and protect her, and he'll give his very life for her if necessary and encourage her to grow in God's truths. I honestly have never seen a polygamous man treat his woman or women with that kind of love. Polygamy is not a command of, nor is it a teaching that comes from God, and we hope that more and more polygamists will check out the truth for themselves. We thank Nicole for telling her story, and we thank you for watching. Good night.